question. It's always tough for the first question, so we'll go to the second question now in a second. But the first question is obviously going to be, what did I think about what happened on January 6th, right? With storming of the Capitol. We are very clear that violence is only allowed in certain circumstances, and that is to defend yourself, or if you've declared war. The Founding Fathers did not go around approving of attacking the British just randomly. They declared a Declaration of Independence, they made their statements, their intentions known, and then they followed through. So any violence without that is unacceptable. We've maintained that throughout the whole BLM attacks of the burning down villages and all that's completely unacceptable. Meanwhile, the left has been completely hypocritical about it, right? I mean, people have been burning down buildings, killing people, destroying things, and now when a group of people that we also don't agree with the destruction, now they're condemning them. Now all of a sudden it's bad, right? So we can see that. I mean, I'm not fooled, you're not fooled, most of us aren't fooled. It's just hypocrisy. So that's number one. The second thing is there are good indications that there was some sort of other agency going on, doing something in the background, so that's there. But what's interesting, and this is where I have difficulty with, if you walk up to a door that is normally closed and it's open and there are police standing in allowing you to walk in, are you there illegally? Because I've been to the Capitol 3 or 4 times and there are always policemen letting me in. You know, so I'm worried that if I'd been in that situation and I was behind the crowd, didn't see what was going on in front, and was in there, I would be saying, oh, you trespassed. Well, I didn't know that because the policeman was right there letting me in. And if you look at the video, you will see that. So, yeah, the people who attacked and broke and destroyed things should be taken into custody and they should be arrested. But the people who followed them in, I mean, you notice, they walked through, they kept to the little lines, all that stuff. yeah, they walked, So there's a lot of that going on. So that's where my dilemma is. Can you really consider them trespassers when they were obviously given permission to walk in? I did write an article on for the EBLM blog site because obviously as a founder of Every Black Lives Matters, we've been condemning the BLM riots all along. And so what do we do when it comes to this? Well, absolutely. We condemn any sort of violence against it. And I talk about that, but here's the other thing you should understand. This was not unprecedented. If you remember in 2017, a few 100,000 people stormed the Wisconsin Capitol because they didn't like Scott Walker. And in fact, or was that 2017? It was one of those years. And in fact, in 2017, a whole bunch of handicapped people stormed the U.S. Capitol because they didn't want Obamacare to be taken away. Right? In 1932, a bunch of servicemen, veterans from the First World War, had been betrayed by the administration. They stormed the Capitol. And so it's not unprecedented. It's not something we recommend, but for you to sit there and go, oh, it's so terrible, our democracy is dying. Well, let me tell you, our democracy does not live in the Capitol. And we're not a democracy, we're a republic. Okay.
Okay.
Say your name first. So.
My name's Benjamin Austin. Okay, so I'd like to know what you think about this with the reframing of the definitions. You defined anarchy as the absence of government.
Yeah.
I would define it differently. I would define it as the absence of the state, which is what you described.
Ben and I have this discussion before. I don't know if we want to go into the details, but keep going, yeah. So Ben, describe what you are, just so people know.
So I would define myself as a Christian anarcho-capitalist. So I believe that governments can be established and should be established through legitimate property ownership. I believe that authority comes from ownership of the land that you say you govern.
And by the way, it's a very valid view. You should look into it. I happen to not tend to that view. I call myself a minarchist, which is not an anarchist, but it's a minimum government type of thing. So it's a variation on that, and there's some things we share alike and some things that we don't. But. What?
Raise it, yeah.
Actually, I'm not even using this. So.
There we go. Okay, so would you think a system like that, under a Christian system where the government does have legitimate ownership, it's not a state, and it's establishing laws at minimum through the No-Hide Covenant, but expanding more on that if the country decides or the city decides to do that? Do you think this would be a good system? And do you think this is something that as Christians we should be like trying to teach to more people and spread the idea?
I think there are a lot of merits to the system. Mm-hmm. I'd have to sit down and look at it more deeply, but I certainly think people should know that. I think kids should know that. They should know all these different systems of government, because a lot of people think it's either this or this. I mean, I just said anarchy, right? And then I jumped to republic. There are variations in between, but they're all still related to representative government in some form or the other. But there are different forms. So one of the problems that we had with the Constitution, before the Constitution was written, I mean, the reason it was written is because the first Constitution that the states had, or whatever the agreement they had, this was not working. Right? That's why they went back to write the Constitution. And there were a lot of people who didn't want that. They didn't want the federal government having so much power. And in retrospect, maybe they were right? So these are the kind of things. And now with 200 and some years later, we're looking at what the Constitution did. Could it be tweaked a bit? And I think it could be tweaked. In fact, there are certain tweaks that we should certainly do. The question is, how do we get there and what do we do? So I'm not going to answer your question directly just because I don't know enough about the details of of that. But I agree that we should study. So folks, look it up. Look up these different forms of the minarchist and anarcho-capitalist system. These are all important terms, and they do have certain variations on how the government should be run. But in the end, it is self-determination. People have the rights, and people are protected. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a relatively niche ideology, so if you're looking for sources on this, it's not very common, but Hans Hermann Hoppe and Tom Woods are good sources to look up for that.
Okay, and if you have my email address.
Tom Woods is actually a Catholic, so like
okay. Send me a link.
Yeah, we'll do.
And I will, if people ask me, I can send it out.
Okay,
thank you, Ben.
Cool.
Appreciate it. You're up, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to make a comment. I'm very familiar with the anarcho-capitalist. I wanted to ask, what do you do when somebody's getting raped and you're an anarcho-capitalist, you do not believe there should be a law of the land? When you're, and especially if you're a Christian, and Jesus says that you should care about your neighbor, you should love your neighbor, and there are no institutions, and something bad happens across the street. What do you do about that?
Okay, Mike, I understand.
Thank you.
So yeah, so these are the arguments people have, right? And it's a great argument. It should be had because these are the issues they do. That's why I like minarchy and minarchists, but but it also has its problems, right?
I'd be happy to answer that question because I'm an anarcho-capitalist who believes in the Murray Rothbardian school of thought. The principle that we need to really
raise the mic up.
Sorry. Yeah, the principle that we need to consider is anarcho-capitalists believe that we own ourselves, that we are sovereign as individuals, we own our bodies, we own the fruits of our labor, we own our property. And in many aspects, the founding fathers were anarcho-capitalists. There are many questions that grow out of anarchy or an anarcho-capitalistic society. We shouldn't be too concerned with answering those questions because it's a difficult hypothetical. We have to concern ourselves with moral absolutes. The reality is that when government imposes itself upon human beings, if we are free and sovereign individuals, do we have consent? The question I would pose is, when you mentioned that we have to script a new document to declare our independence, I would claim in order to avoid violence or to justify a potentially violent movement to recapture our liberty.
Oh, yeah.
Haven't we already done that? The Declaration of Independence did that
for
us.
So you're saying yes, yeah.
The Articles of Confederation, which I would also like to hear how they were inadequate, I would contend that they were more than adequate. The states are sovereign. We have to recognize that. A couple of questions I have for you. Are the states sovereign? Do they have the right to secede? And number two, hasn't the Constitution already given us a basis on which to wage resistance to a regime that has become oppressive to its ends?
Okay, so those are great questions. So, and let me summarize what he's saying. Since we already have a Declaration of Independence, do we have to declare again that we are breaking from it? I think the reason I say that is because I don't want, if we are going to gather together, then we should first gather together and let them know that we are holding ourselves to the Declaration. I don't want it to be a bunch of rebels fighting all over the place. Because I've lived in countries like that where you've got a balkanization and then you've got multiple. It ends up being Somalia again, right? And so we definitely don't want that. We want the people to gather together and then make a statement and then let other people understand what the statement is and where we're coming from and then see if there is an issue there. Now, let me answer the next one. Do we have the right to secede? Absolutely. And this is where I disagreed. This is where I disagreed with Lincoln. Now, you don't have to agree with me. You don't have to agree with me. Did the South have the right to secede from the Union? Absolutely, because they joined the Union voluntarily, and there was nothing in the declaration of their federal system that said that they couldn't leave the Union. So absolutely, I agree with 100%. Now, I hate the fact that they would have left and slavery would have continued there, but let me tell you this. Slavery was a dying system, economically non-viable. It was a lot, think about it, it's a lot cheaper to hire 4 contractors to work as hard as they can and pay them for what they yield than to enslave 10 men. And to get those 10 men to work, you had to hire 4 other men to capture them, and then you had to keep them enslaved, and then you have to feed them, and then you have to take care of their wives and their daughters, and then you have this huge ecosystem that you have to maintain. It was just not viable. The South was dying on the vine. In fact, why was the North so powerful and so rich? Because slavery didn't work, and the North understood that. So it would not last. So yeah, so if you think, and that's just to say, did they have the right to secede? Yeah, they should have been given the right to secede and then hung themselves on their own noose.
And I just have one final question. In what capacity are Republicans classically liberal?
So this is another issue. In fact, if you look at the original Republicans, when Lincoln took over, he was not classically liberal in any sense of the word. In fact, he was big government. He was bigger government than some of the Democrats, right? So, and in fact, remember what Lincoln did. And again, I don't, my wife and I have this argument all the time because I didn't grow up here, so I don't have this allegiance to Lincoln like most people do. And I think Lincoln did a lot of bad things. I mean, he suspended habeas corpus, which means no evidence. He could put people in jail for any reason or no reason at all. So these are all bad things that ended up being good in the long run. It did some good. You're right. But I don't think that the people who joined the Republican Party now, at least in the last few years, most of us are classical liberals. Yeah. Right? Now, the leadership is not.
I would just, in closing, say that an alternative would be the libertarian philosophy.
Yeah, which I have trouble with, being a minarchist. So.
Thank you.
By the way, I don't want to go off on this whole anarcho-capitalist stuff because a lot of people don't know about it. What we should do is have a speaker to introduce these different concepts, and then you guys, right? So.
Can I answer real quick, 30 seconds?
Yeah.
What's wrong with first of all, the concept of sovereignty? How many people have a problem with the concept of sovereignty? In the Bible, what is the hierarchy of things? The hierarchy of people is God is first, then is man, right? Then is nature. So how can anyone who's a Christian say the sovereignty means that I get to make my own laws? That's the first problem. So that was the capital sin when man, instead of obeying God's law, became a law unto himself. Does that sound like anarcho-capitalism?
Well, again,
because it sounds like that to me. Okay?
Yeah.
So my friend, who is a speaker, Ravi Zacharias, who mentored me in the past, he explained to me, he was the first person, only person who ever made sense to me of what freedom is. He said that freedom cannot be understood apart from design. If you say, what's a hammer good for? Well, what was it designed for? To pound nails, to break things, stuff like that. If you ask the question, what's a horse good for? Well, what it was designed for. If I ask you a question, what is a man good for? Who defines what a man is and what is it good for? That is God. So you cannot say the man is a law unto himself and I get to decide whatever I want to do, right? You can't do that. That is anarchy. That's subjectively determining what I want to do with myself or my body or how I want to treat other people. That's subjectivism. In Christianity, we believe that God is the law of all things, that is the top of all hierarchies.
Okay.
that's the problem with libertarianism. That
Yeah,
is
but again,
misunderstood.
Mike, I don't want to.
Thank you so much. I just
Maybe we
didn't
can have
want
a
that.
debate up here, right? Well, guess who it is?
Haha. We're not expecting this. All right, so this is a question.
This is my daughter, the lawyer.
Lawyer.
She's not 7 anymore.
Oh yeah, forgot about that. I had a question. I was wondering if other people were wondering this too. What do we do about the rhinos? They confuse me so much. I don't even know.
Yeah, so my daughter lives on a steady diet of Ben Shapiro. And a few other things. She comes and asks me these questions. I'm like, I hadn't heard that. She's like, well, Dad, so-and-so said this. How come you haven't listened to him? I'm like, oh, I haven't listened to him yet. So, yeah, the rhinos, rhino, by the way, in case you don't know, is Republican in name only. Now, here's the problem as one of the last questions. I didn't get your name, by the way. Do connect with me later. Mentioned is that not all Republicans, remember, the Christians went to the Republican Party earlier on because of slavery. And then there was a time when they were drifting away from them, and then they came back again in the 80s under Reagan, right? So it is a party that we define. It's closer to what we align with, and therefore it is our job to then mold it into what we want it to be. So a rhino is a Republican in name only, basically is a Mitt Romney, right? So where they're old school, progressive, but they act very they're elitist. So the only way we can do is we have to elect them out, right? We have to vote them out. That's the only way. There's no and we got to get rid of them. The problem is you can't get rid of them unless you have a good base of conservatives or classical liberals behind them, and that's what the problem is. Yeah, well, we don't put them in. Yeah, but you've got to. The Tea Party did a very good job of getting rid of some rhinos, and now we just have to continue that. Yes.
So I don't really have a question, but I have more of a comment.
Oh, okay.
So,
well, let's limit the comments, but go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a Christian. I don't have any title on certain denomination or whatever. Like that guy in the red shirt, he was saying there's a title, but I don't have that. I don't know much about politics, but I just joined in. I didn't vote. But I think if we are, just as a comment, if we are given any title or any place in politics or any space to speak, I think the centerpiece should be the blood of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And Him crucified and the power of God that can change somebody's life.
Amen. And that is, by the way, exactly why men and women in the world have done what they've done. The freeing of the slaves, right? William Wilberforce in England becomes a Christian, and he realizes what God has done for him and that the slave is his brother, right? And he's moved to change him. Telemachus walks into the gladiatorial pits in Rome and pleads with them to stop the killing in the pits. And they kill him. But the emperor then sees that, who was a Christian, and says, this has got to stop. So over and over again, we see that Christ has moved us to do that. Yes. Thank you.
Point about our sovereignty. There's a thing called the Convention of States, which I haven't heard anybody talk about.
Yeah.
But it's a way of regaining our control of the government through the Convention of States.
Yeah. So basically there's an idea, and Mark Levin pushes this a lot. The idea of the Convention of States is you call a Convention of States and you create more amendments and things like that. There's a group of people who disagree with that. There's a group of people they're afraid that if you do Convention of States, it will ruin the Republic. There's a group of people who say, no, it won't ruin the Republic. So there's a big argument there. I'm kind of neutral about it. I'd be interested to see what would happen if they did meet. They should do a trial convention of the states. Or maybe they already had one, I don't remember. But it would be very interesting to see. But I don't know. We have 26 states right now. To any convention of states, it would have to need at least 3/4 of majority to pass anything, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So it would be interesting to see how you could get there, too.
Hello, my name is Tom Nowinski. I'm not real versed and studied in the Constitution per se, but I've been hearing a lot about the Insurrection Act thrown around. So I need some clarity on that, and I'm not coming from
No, I
the
understand.
Democrats' camp. I'm coming from the actual real Insurrection Act.
Yeah.
What legal claim does it have? And does Donald Trump have a possibility of using that act?
So this is one of the questions I can't answer. Because, one, I've not sat down and studied it, right? So I can't speak to it. So that's the main reason. And the second thing is that there's so much going around. I would actually have to sit down and read it and then look at all the legal. Because here's the thing, here's one of the problems that always bothers me. You can look at a legal opinion, you can look at the words, and then you have to figure out what stupid way will a judge interpret it. Right? Because I've seen something that are very clear. I mean, who would have thought we would have gotten Roe v. Wade out of the Constitution of the United States? Who, right? Nobody, right? So that's the other thing is that, so it has two pieces. One, what does the act actually say? And two, what will a judge rule if it ever gets to a judge, right? So, at the end of the day, it's who's going to execute it, right? Who's going to carry it out?
Yeah, there's a lot of components to it that I can see. I'll continue to pray that the Father has his hand on this nation.
We pray so too,
and we continue to wait for his move.
Yeah.
Because it's his turn now.
Yeah. But thank you.
Hi, Neil. Thank you for coming tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so my question, maybe comment, I'm so with you when you were talking about the opportunity for the church, the ecclesia, the governing body of Christ to occupy the positions that are available for influence, right? To bring about the reformation that needs to happen. So I guess my question is, how can we begin to mobilize, really? Like I was thinking about like having, a Christian super PAC, or like we have churches here that make, they make good money through tithes and offerings and things like that, and they have programs. But now, like, if we can kind of bring that in and have that money go for things like supporting a politician that we raise up out of our community. Right. You know what I mean? So how can we begin to bring that into reality? Because we can talk and say this, we want to do this, but we have to be about works too, right? So maybe we can speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, so this has been one of my biggest frustrations as a U.S. citizen, right? I mean, I came here, and it took me 12 years to become a U.S. citizen, and the day I got my citizenship paper, and I was signing the guys who were trying to get me to register to vote was the League of Women Voters. And I knew they were liberal, so I said, I'm not signing your thing. So I went to some fair, and there was a Republican table, and I said, I want to register to vote. And he started talking to me, and he said, oh, you got to run for office. Because I knew more, because I had to become a citizen, I had to study the Constitution. Mm-hmm. So he said, you know more about the Constitution than a lot of people. He said, you should run for office. So I said, yeah, sure. And ever since then, and I didn't make it, I was running for Republican Central Committee. Oh. And I didn't know what I was doing, which is fine. But ever since then, it's been frustrating me because the church is not being involved. Now think about it. Who else has a gathering of 300,000 groups consisting of something like 20 to 30 million people every week? Bible studies. Right. Where else would be the most powerful way to focus and pass the word and transmit the word to all these Bible studies? I mean, it doesn't have to be the same thing, but the whole idea that we should mobilize, that would be the place I would mobilize. And that's why I wrote my book, Jesus is Involved in Politics. Why isn't your church? And it's in the back there. But it says, I go through a list of things that we should do. And there's a whole bunch of them there. This is what we should do, this is what we should do, this is what we should do. The problem is the churches are afraid because of the Johnson Amendment.
Right, but
But the Johnson Amendment is useless because nobody's ever been sued. By the way, just so you don't know what the Johnson Amendment is, back in the 50s, Johnson, who became president, Lyndon Johnson, was a senator in Texas, or some maybe I don't know, he was something in Texas, and a group of nonprofits thought he was corrupt, and he was corrupt, and so they started petitioning and using their nonprofit money to campaign against him, and he didn't like that, so he passed a tax amendment that said that if you are a nonprofit, you can't say anything political. Mm-hmm. Well, since then, every church has been, and he didn't mean it for the churches, but since then, every church has been afraid to say anything political. Well, in a few years ago, I think like 10, 20 years ago, FRC and a bunch of people said, okay, we're going to try to challenge this. And they would have pastors on Freedom Pulpit Sunday, which is I think in September, October. They would come up and they would actually preach a very political sermon, and they would send it to the IRS and said, come after me. And the IRS never did. Because they know that the minute it's challenged in court, oh, can you hear me? Okay, the minute it's challenged in court, it's going to die, right? Especially now with this court, right? So I think it's an educational process. How do we get there? I have a list of things. There's a flyer out there called Salt and Light, which if you take it to your church, whatever church you go to, and you try to...
I go here.
Oh, you go here, which is... Yeah, so then you're fine. This church is very active, as you know. But in most churches, if you can start a Salt and Light chapter, then we can start moving and mobilizing people. But that's where it has to go. It has to go to the point where the pastors are actually getting involved personally, because the people follow the shepherd.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi, Neil.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. I'm Victoria. Thank you for being here. My question is, how would you go about overcoming the brainwashing of the media and big tech and all the censorship going on?
Well, the beautiful thing is that they're kicking it off social media. And that is a beautiful thing. Because for so long, we've been telling Christians, get off there and go to something else. And we've been looking for something else to be started, and it was never started. So now they're forcing us to do that. So I think that's beautiful. The fact that the president got kicked off Parler, of Twitter, right, is now on Parler. And then Apple says, we don't want you to have Parler on your iPhone. So I'm saying, okay, stop buying iPhones, right? Now Google said we're not going to keep it in the Play Store, but Google, you can't do that. You can just still download it. Just say, how do I upload Parler without Google Play? And you can still upload it, right? So these are the venues that we have to go and we have to mobilize. What the Christians need to understand is that it's time that we take back control of these things. Because at the end of the day, they look at the almighty dollar, and let me tell you, there are a lot more of us than there are of them, right? I mean, remember one call by Mike Huckabee, and you know who the biggest chain in the world, the biggest money-making chain in the, one of the top chains in the world is Chick-fil-A, right? Now, is Chick-fil-A better than every other sandwich in the world? No, but it stands for something. Of course, Chick-fil-A guys will say, what do you mean, we're not better than everybody else? But I'd eat Chick-fil-A any day. Why? Because I know what they stand for, and if they stop standing for it, and there was some hints that they may be, we're going to abandon them. So I think that's where we go. We need to be taking over. I actually like that they're deplatforming us. I actually like that they're deplatforming us because it's going to force us to take action, and it's going to force alternatives. It's just the same way like we finally realized that the media was nonsense, right? I mean, think about, yeah, people still get free ABC, CBS, NBC, but think of how many people don't get it from there. Right? So I'm not worried about that. I think it's great. And as long as you keep the government out of it, the only way you can have a monopoly is if the government is controlling it. And I'll give you a quick story of how the government controls monopoly. Imagine there are 4 railway stations, railway companies. And each railway company has their own peculiarities. Let's say my railway company is old and decrepit, and my carriages are kind of breaking down. Well, guess what? I'm going to cut my rates because you don't want to travel on my trains unless it's really cheap. So I give you a really cheap rate. Well, the guy who has the best railway company can't do that. So from San Francisco to New York, I'm going to charge $80 and he's going to charge you $120. But after I start charging $80, he has to have a price war. So he drops his price and then I drop my price and we get in this big price war. And he says, look guys, this is not going to work. And he calls all the 4 railway guys together, and we all meet, and he says, look, we can't have a price war because we'll all lose money. Neil, why don't you just at least stick to $90? Because I can manage that, and then we'll give him all these extra things. So I say, okay, fine, I'll deal with you. So I change my price to $90, he changes it back to $120, and we're going. And after a while, I realized, I need a new infrastructure. I need to get more people on my train, and I mean, my trains cost nothing. I'm going to drop my price to $80 again. And there's another price war, and it goes on and on. And then they call us all together, and they say, this is it. So finally, the rich guy says, I can't do this. I'm going to lose money. And he calls his favorite lobbyist and his favorite senator, and he says, you got to pass a law because Neil's trains are not safe. The people need safer trains. That's how monopolies are created. You need a government to control a monopoly. If they're all free enterprise, we're fine. I guess this will be the last one because we're at 8 o'clock. So, oh, okay. Do you guys want to go longer? I mean, I don't want to bore you to death or anything. Okay, we'll go for a few more minutes. Yeah.
All right, 2 points and 1 question.
Yes.
Point 1, you had mentioned that slavery was dying and it was on its way to deathbed. I believe that human trafficking is alive and well in this nation, and it is a bad thing, and it is ever growing. So
yes,
it's
absolutely.
replenishable.
Human trafficking, again, we should stand for rights.
Right.
So. The question was not about did the slaves have the rights. The question was, and that's what the West should have, I mean, the North should have definitely passed the Freedom of the Slaves Emancipation Proclamation, but
which was
they
January
could not.
1st, by the way.
Pardon?
Which was January 1st.
Oh, it was, okay. But at the same time, they couldn't allow the South not to secede, yeah.
Right. Good. Point 2, the question was about insurrection, and I read this every week just so that I can make sure that I'm on board with it. I'm going to read it again. The Insurrection Act of 1807 and the Emergency Economic Powers Act are United States federal laws that govern the ability of the President of the United States to deploy military troops within the United States to put down lawlessness, insurrection, and rebellion. So that is what it is. The third component of this that I wanted to...
So obviously with that, there is a danger, right? So I always say, anytime you give a president power, a president that you like power, a president that you don't like will have the same power. So
well, he's the commander-in-chief, so he is the forerunner of the military.
So the problem is that the things that we always worry about is that, okay, so he does it for a good reason. Well, the next guy, 2024 when Kamala Harris runs, will she then use that for bad, right? So I always worry about things like that. Again, as I have not studied it, but go ahead, yeah.
So the point I wanted to mention before I walk away would be, I think the second term of Woodrow Wilson was when the government changed.
Did he have a second term? I thought.
And that was with the banking system.
Yeah. But did Woodrow Wilson get a second term? I thought he
didn't, but when he was running for his second term, before he left, before he walked away, he handed over the United States of America Corporation.
Yes, to the Federal Reserve.
To the Federals.
Yeah. So, by the way, let me explain the background. The Federal Reserve, Woodrow Wilson, one of the worst presidents we ever had in the world. And let me blame the person who's at fault, Teddy Roosevelt. Because Teddy had been president. He decided not to run again. He handed it over to his vice president, who ran and won. And then he suddenly decided he wanted to be president again. And so he ran against his own vice president, split the vote. They still got 38 to 39 votes. I mean, 39%. They got more than 67% of the vote or something like that. But Woodrow Wilson, who had no chance in winning, got 40% or something. And so he took the presidency, and he started the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve basically is a private group of banks. We had no income tax before that, right? And you're like, no income tax? No, we didn't have an income tax before 1913 or whatever it was. And so I am hoping to get a great author to come speak about that. His name is E.W. Griffin, right? Griffin. I've reached out to him. We're just going to try and schedule him. He wrote the book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. It's this thick, but I'm telling you, it's a great read. Read it. It is an amazing book. We have a kids version. We actually occasionally would sell a kids version of it, which is done by the Tuttle twins, but we don't have it today. But anyway.
Just a quick question. Can you talk generally with us about the cancel culture?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, it's very generic. I mean, the whole concept of the cancel culture is basically that if they don't like what you're saying, they disparage you and they demean you and they call you names. I mean, it's the whole thing of you. It's the Saul Alinsky method, right? The best way is to mock something and then to call it evil and to demonize it. And so the cancel culture basically is that we're going to get rid of you if you're pro-life. In fact, right now, from what I heard, Twitter is canceling all pro-life accounts too. right? So that's sort of the cancel culture right there. We're going to cancel you on that. But what they don't realize is that, fine, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. Because I think eventually... Now, here's the only problem. If I leave Facebook, how am I going to argue with liberals? So I stay on Facebook just to goad my liberal friends. Just to mock them and to write things that would make them angry. But if you don't want to know what I really think about, go to MeWe, because that's where I'm at. So anyway. So the cancel culture basically is that, and it's very dangerous because all conservatives are going to be canceled at some point by the culture. So, yeah, MEWE, MeWe.com. Now, there are other ones that are out there, and that's the beauty about the free market. The best one will kind of work itself out eventually.
Neil, thank you for giving me an extra little minute. I feel this is very important, and I've been dying to share this with you and everybody else. You see presently that there's an attempt to make the Republican Party look stainless and elevate it to divine status almost, and anything to make the Democrats look bad. And it's true, Democrats are not a good party. Republican Party, I'm thankful for everything they're doing, but I believe that there's some dangers if we use the terminology of the BLM, of the Democratic Party, and as well as Karl Marx's lingo that we associate, not intentionally, but by what we're saying. Karl Marx was also supposedly opposed to slavery. So you've got to really get to the heart of what slavery is, what does the Bible say about it, and how it's implemented. There are terrible marriages, bad marriages, but we don't say marriage, get rid of it, it's awful. Right. There are some good marriages. But anyway.
I'm worried where this is going.
What's that? Okay. So the Republican Party tried to set forth the Corwin Amendment. Are you familiar with that? No. The Corwin Amendment, I believe 1863, maybe even before, was an attempt by the Republican Party to permanently institutionalize slavery in the continent of America, and then that way there would be no more discussion. It's called the Corwin Amendment. Highly recommend everyone check it out. Supported by Abraham Lincoln, by the way. Okay. That's the Corwin Amendment.
How do you spell that?
What's that?
How do you spell that?
Corwin, C-O-R-W-I-N,
okay,
I believe,
I'll look it up.
Something like that.
Okay.
Please look it up. It's amazing. The truth is always better than going along with what sounds good. It really is. It sets you free, and you know you're standing on solid ground. Also, the famous Emancipation Proclamation and all the cartoons that were done at the time make Lincoln look out as almost like a Jesus savior, right. Rescuing the blacks.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is that Declaration Proclamation was a political military move that said that slaves in the occupied territories would be released, hoping to get some kind of insurrection on the part of the slaves. But yet, if you were in the northern territories...
Right. So there were two... So just so you know, there were two states to whom the Emancipation Proclamation did not apply. They were in the north. So he didn't free the slaves in the north. He only frees the slaves in the south. So you can see it was a political game. But I think what came out of it, again...
Yeah, I mean, he was under a lot of pressure. There were abolitionists talking in his ear, and he said, well, what's the best solution? I'll do this Emancipation Proclamation. But no one was really freed from that. I would love to find out if there was one name of a person.
Yeah. But it carried through, though, to when the Union was intact, right?
Ultimately, after the war,
and then you had
with the 13th Amendment, which was actually championed by a Southern Democrat, believe it or not. I know his name. So that was the Emancipation Proclamation, 1863. Why is it that the Union brought in a slave state in 1863 in the middle of the war, which was Delaware and West Virginia? Does anybody know that? Anyway, So what my point is that the Union did not go in to fight against slavery, which is a common misperception. It's moral, what do you call it? Just virtue signaling, really, on the part of us to say that.
And so this is what I said since I came here, I wasn't like, I didn't see Abraham Lincoln. I was ready to see all his awards and everything. From what I've read, I think Abraham Lincoln originally wanted to send the slaves back to Africa.
That was what I was going to say. He was part of the American colony program where free blacks, I found it wasn't just slaves, but free blacks would be sent back to Liberia because he believed that the two people groups could not get along with each other.
And this is from my reading and from my discussion, is I believe that after he met Frederick Douglass, that changed his mind completely. So I think Frederick Douglass was the impetus, because yes, originally he was, but then towards the end you see he wasn't, and this was after he had met Frederick Douglass and read his books and stuff. So my understanding of that, and we have the chairman of the Frederick Douglass Foundation here somewhere who could actually add. Just go back to the EBLM book booth. Kevin McGarry is my co-founder of EBLM, and he's also the chairman of the Frederick Douglass Foundation of California.
Thank you for your commitment to the truth, Neil. I love that. You. That is wonderful. Anyway,
but I think the summary is that all these men have their warts, just like Washington had slaves and Jefferson had slaves.
Yeah,
too.
And if we run with the warts that aren't true, we can inadvertently be validating the other side.
Yes,
if we're not careful.
Okay. So we'll do one last question with Kevin. Kevin, make it an easy one, buddy. No sermons. Kevin is good at sermons.
This is actually just an advertisement.
Oh, okay, yes.
So this is a great opportunity to get off of Twitter and Facebook and Amazon and all that kind of stuff. Your friend and mine built USA.life.
Yes.
It's a Christian, conservative social media.
Andrew.
USA.life. And USA.life, yeah. So
David
come
Andrew.
and join me.
David Andrew?
David Andrew. Stephen.
Stephen David. Stephen Andrew.
Stephen
David.
He used to go to this church.
I know him as Steve Krotowski, but
so we know him, and he built it, and he manages it, he runs it. He is a full-on solid. He's also
so you
a
should
pastor.
definitely look that up too. Again, these things are going to have to shake out with competition and whatever gives you the best service, but you should definitely try all these out. I am looking for someone out there in the ether to write an app where I can share it to one of these things and we'll share to all of them automatically. And copy back from all of them back to one app that I want. So that's what I'm looking for. Last one, fine, we'll give you the last one, buddy.
Love you, Neil.
I love you too, buddy.
Known this guy for a while. Have been lost track of him for a while.
At least 10, 15 years, right?
Do you think that it would be good to have maybe a contingency plan?
You mean for the
20th? And for the church?
You mean for the 20th, after the 20th, or are you talking about just in general? I don't know what you mean.
You can read it however you want. I'm trying to be short. This is my attempt at being short. Yeah.
Contingency is good. I don't know where. Yeah.
Well, you're thinking, that's good. But I don't live in a world of unicorns and rainbows. So. Do you guys?
Sure.
So tell you what, if you want, I'll do something. I'll make a presentation to you folks, and you can think about
possible
contingency, or I'll send you something, an email. My people will email your
my
people.
Have your people call my people, and they can do lunch.
We'll do that. Enough said.
Thanks, buddy. Thank you all. You've been great.